Desire has always thrived in the shadows of the unknown, feeding not on possession but on pursuit, on the tantalizing gap between what is wanted and what is owned. The chase is what electrifies the heart, ignites the imagination, and floods the body with a sense of urgency. Yet the paradox lies here: the very moment something is fully grasped, dissected, and understood, its magnetism begins to dissolve. The law is simple: what we run after shines like a diamond, but the second we hold it under the harsh light of knowledge, the brilliance fades into ordinary stone. This is not merely about objects or people, but about the very psychology of human longing, the mechanism that keeps us restless, unsatisfied, and in search of the next mystery that promises to make us feel alive. The hidden law of desire works because mystery acts as fuel. It is the ambiguity, the unanswered questions, the uncertain promise of what might be, that spins the mind into endless obsession. A closed book invites no reader, but a book with missing pages leaves the imagination to work overtime. When the mask conceals the face, the mind fills the gaps with fantasy, often imagining more beauty, depth, or power than reality could ever deliver. The danger and allure lie not in the truth, but in the space between what is shown and what is hidden. The moment the mask slips, when every secret is revealed, the air of fascination collapses under the weight of certainty. What was once chased like a rare treasure suddenly feels mundane, stripped of the aura that made it irresistible. This law explains why forbidden fruit has always tasted sweeter than the fruit handed openly. It is not the apple itself that tempts, but the act of reaching beyond the boundary, breaking the rule, touching what was said to be untouchable. The craving is not born from the object, but from the veil of limitation wrapped around it. The chase thrives in scarcity, in the suggestion that one must work, wait, or risk something to attain it. When that scarcity is shattered, when the fruit is simply placed in the palm without resistance, the sweetness loses its edge. Desire is a fire that feeds on distance, and once distance vanishes, so too does the flame. The law also applies to relationships, ambitions, and even dreams. The person admired from afar glows with mystery, each glance sparking curiosity about the depths unseen. But once every story is told, every habit revealed, every flaw exposed, the shine dulls and the chase ends. The dream job that once seemed glamorous often becomes routine once achieved, its magic stripped away by the reality of daily repetition. Even luxury, when acquired in excess, becomes nothing more than background noise, no different than the ordinary. The human mind is wired not to be satisfied by attainment, but to be intoxicated by the promise of attainment. It is in the tension between what is wanted and what is withheld that desire finds its strength. To understand this hidden law is to gain a form of liberation. It teaches that obsession is not about the object of desire, but about the veil draped over it. The pull you feel is rarely toward reality, but toward illusion, toward the mystery that the mind weaves in the absence of complete knowledge. The true power lies not in what is possessed, but in what is imagined. This is why silence often holds more power than explanation, why absence burns deeper than presence, and why restraint seduces more intensely than indulgence. The law of desire is ruthless in its clarity. The moment you pierce the veil, the mystery dies, and with it dies the hunger that once consumed you. Scarcity has always been one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior, a hidden hand that dictates choices, bends perceptions, and ignites desire. The human mind is conditioned to value what appears limited, to chase after what seems difficult to obtain, and to assign worth not by intrinsic quality but by the degree of access. A glass of water in a desert becomes priceless, while the same glass in a city kitchen is almost invisible. This is the trick scarcity plays. It magnifies importance not by changing the object itself, but by manipulating the perception of its availability. And yet behind this power lies a subtle truth. What appears rare is often not rare at all, but deliberately withheld, cloaked in illusion, rationed out in fragments to keep its value inflated. The scarcity is not in the thing itself, but in the strategy that controls its distribution. This is why limited editions sell out in minutes, not because the item is irreplaceable, but because the supplier understands human psychology. The illusion of only a few left flips a switch in the brain, turning indifference into urgency, hesitation into desperate action. What was once a want suddenly becomes a need, not because its essence changed, but because the perception of time and access was manipulated. It is the same principle in auctions, luxury branding, even relationships. The withholding of supply creates the illusion of rarity, and that illusion is what gives birth to desire. People do not simply want what is good, they want what they believe others cannot have. Scarcity is the illusion that scarcity exists, yet illusions are fragile. Once the curtain is lifted and the trick is exposed, the spell loses its grip. What was once revered as rare begins to look common. The very same handbag, watch, or opportunity that seemed to glow with prestige becomes just another object once the mind realizes it was never truly scarce, only rationed. This is why the second-hand market often feels hollow, why once coveted luxury goods lose their sheen when seen everywhere, and why certain relationships collapse when the power dynamic shifts. The scarcity was never real, it was a mirage, and when the mirage dissolves, so does the desire. Scarcity, therefore, is less about things and more about control. Those who understand it wield enormous influence because they are able to turn ordinary into extraordinary through the careful art of withholding. They know that the masses are not driven by logic, but by fear of loss, fear of missing out, fear of being left outside a gate that others seem to be entering. This is why silence often outweighs words, why absence burns hotter than constant presence, why rationed attention commands more devotion than endless availability. It is not the abundance of what you offer that creates value, but the precision with which you restrict it. The danger lies in forgetting that the power of scarcity is temporary. Once revealed, once the mechanics of withholding are exposed, its ability to control evaporates. A magician's trick loses its magic the moment the secret is explained, no matter how dazzling it once appeared. Similarly, the spell of scarcity collapses when people recognize it for what it is, an illusion designed to manipulate their longing. The object does not lose value because it has changed, but because the veil of mystery has been torn away, exposing its ordinariness. What was once chase now feels unworthy of the chase, not because it lacks substance, but because the artificial scarcity that fed its worth has dissolved. To grasp this law is to step out of the trap. It is to see clearly that much of what humans run toward in desperation is not inherently rare, only carefully rationed to appear so. It is to understand that the true strength does not lie in the objects, titles, or affections withheld, but in the awareness that the illusion exists at all. Once this awareness is gained, the grip of scarcity loosens, and with it the chains of manufactured desire. In every age, power has worn different masks, land, wealth, armies, influence, but beneath them all runs a deeper currency that rules human interaction attention. It is the invisible gold, the silent crown that elevates some to thrones while leaving others forgotten in obscurity. Attention is not merely the act of looking or listening, it is the channel through which value, desire, and meaning flow. Without attention, even the most brilliant idea, the most beautiful creation, or the most seductive gesture collapses into nothingness. With it, even the most ordinary becomes extraordinary, magnified by the collective gaze of others. Attention transforms perception into reality, and whoever can direct it, capture it, or withdraw it at will, possesses a power more absolute than wealth or status. Human desire itself is shaped by attention. What people want is often not determined by the thing's intrinsic value, but by the degree to which it is spotlighted. A product becomes desirable because everyone is talking about it. A leader gains legitimacy because the crowd turns its eyes in his direction. Even in personal relationships, worth is measured not in quiet reality, but in the energy of attention given or withheld. The lover who is indifferent, who withholds acknowledgement, often generates more fascination than the one who constantly floods with affection. The paradox is clear. Attention gives life, but it is also its own scarcity, and in this scarcity lies its worth. The digital age has made this truth undeniable. Platforms do not trade in products but in attention, harvesting it, redirecting it, and selling it like a commodity. The algorithms do not care about truth or depth, they care only about what captures eyes and holds them. Wars are no longer fought with swords, but with headlines, with images, with the ability to seize collective focus. Influence now belongs not to those with the most resources, but to those who command the most screens, the most clicks, the most hearts and minds turned in their direction. The throne belongs to the one who dictates the flow of attention, not necessarily the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who can make silence louder than noise. In personal dynamics, this law is even more ruthless. When someone withdraws attention, it is felt like a wound, as if existence itself is being denied. Children cry for it, adults chase it, nations fight for it, lovers crave it. It is the acknowledgement of being seen, being validated, being chosen out of the infinite sea of faces. Attention is the mirror in which identity is confirmed, and so people will twist themselves, sacrifice their integrity, even give up their peace just to remain within its glow. Yet the one who knows how to ration it, how to direct it with precision rather than recklessness, becomes the master of the exchange. Abundance of attention often breeds contempt, scarcity of it breeds hunger. The balance between the two is where control lies. Attention is also a weapon. To give it to one thing is to starve another. To spotlight one truth is to shadow another. To elevate one figure is to bury countless others in silence. Leaders, marketers, seducers, manipulators all understand this. They know that you do not need to control reality, only perception. If you can make people look where you want them to look, they will forget what lies outside the frame. Power is not in having everything but in controlling what is seen. The throne, therefore, does not belong to the one who owns the most, but to the one who decides what others notice. Attention is the tax every soul pays to meaning, the bloodline of influence, the silent engine of desire. To understand this is to understand the essence of control. Attention is not given. It is traded, it is stolen, it is withheld, it is weaponized. And the one who knows how to control its flow does not need crowns or armies, because the gaze of others has already placed him on the throne. Silence has always carried a weight far greater than noise. Where words spill endlessly, they can be dissected, doubted, twisted, or dismissed, but silence resists all attempts at manipulation. It stands immovable, like a shadow that cannot be fought with a blade. This is why silence is not weakness, but a weapon sharp, invisible, and unnerving. It disarms without striking, commands without demanding, and creates authority without ever needing to explain itself. In the presence of silence, others are forced to reveal themselves, to fill the void with their own fears, insecurities, and confessions, while the one who remains quiet maintains control. Words invite debate, but silence closes the door to it. When someone speaks and receives no reply, the echo of their own voice unsettles them. They begin to wonder if they have said too much, revealed too little, or failed to strike the right chord. The lack of response magnifies their doubt, making them question themselves rather than the silent one. Silence is therefore not the absence of communication, but its most precise form, for it pushes the burden of meaning onto the other person. The mind cannot rest in the face of silence. It begins to invent explanations, to imagine intentions, to interpret what is unsaid as more powerful than what could ever be spoken. History and strategy are filled with examples of silence used as dominance. In negotiation, the one who rushes to fill the silence often loses, offering more than they intended simply to ease the discomfort of the void. In conflict, the refusal to respond enrages the aggressor more than any insult could, because nothing is more infuriating than striking a wall that refuses to move. In leadership, silence creates an aura of gravity, for when words are rare, they seem more valuable, carrying the weight of consideration and restraint. The greatest kings, generals, and thinkers understood that silence was not passivity but power, the ability to withhold when others expect release, to restrain when others demand reaction. Silence also sharpens mystery. A person who speaks little draws more curiosity than one who constantly explains themselves. The unknown invites fascination, while the overly revealed invites dismissal. Silence is the cloak that keeps value hidden, suggesting depths that may not even exist, but which others imagine nonetheless. It is in this way that silence becomes seduction, pulling attention without chasing it, creating hunger without feeding it, leaving the mind of the other restless, unsatisfied yet unable to turn away. To remain silent is to allow others to project their fantasies, their fears, their questions onto you while you give nothing in return. The power lies not in answering, but in denying them the relief of certainty. Yet silence must be used with precision. To remain silent when speech is required is weakness, but to remain silent when speech is expected is dominance. It is a weapon that works only when wielded intentionally, when the stillness carries the force of choice rather than fear. Silence is not retreat, it is resistance. It does not run from confrontation, it intensifies it, heightening the tension until the other breaks under the weight of it. Like a drawn bowstring, silence is a held force, ready to release but refusing to do so until the moment is right. In every form of human interaction, silence has the ability to shift power. It denies access, it withholds validation, it creates unease, and it forces others to wrestle with themselves. Where words may falter, silence remains untouchable. It cannot be argued with, disproven, or dismantled because it offers nothing to attack. And in that nothingness lies its strength. Those who master silence carry a weapon no noise can rival, an authority born not from force or persuasion, but from the unshakable presence of restraint. Illusion has always been the stage on which power performs. Strategies, manipulations, and seductions depend not on truth, but on the veil that hides it. People do not fall for reality, they fall for what they believe reality to be. The success of every scheme, whether in politics, business, or personal dynamics, relies on keeping the other side blind to its true workings. So long as the illusion holds, the spell thrives. But awareness is the great disruptor, and the moment it enters, the entire construction begins to crack. Ignorance is the soil in which illusions grow, knowledge is the blade that cuts them down. The mechanics of this law are simple yet ruthless. Illusion thrives because the mind prefers stories to facts, appearances to complexities, simplicity to contradictions. A product appears valuable not because of what it truly offers, but because the story around it is carefully crafted. A leader seems noble not because of his essence, but because of the symbols, rituals, and myths woven around him. A person appears magnetic not because of who they are, but because of the mystery and withholding that invites projection. The illusion works so long as no one examines it too closely. But the moment a curious eye pierces the veil, when the machinery behind the stage is revealed, the magic evaporates and the ordinary truth stands exposed. This collapse is often sudden, like the snapping of a thread. What once inspired awe becomes laughable. The spell does not fade slowly, it shatters in an instant. A luxury brand once revered as untouchable loses its luster when exposed as mass-produced. A manipulator loses grip the moment their tactics are named aloud. A grand narrative that once unified masses dissolves into fragments once contradictions are illuminated. Awareness does not fight illusions. It dissolves them by showing they were never real in the first place. The power of the illusion lies entirely in the blindness of those who believe it. The collapse of illusion is also the collapse of control. Those who weave illusions depend on silence and ignorance to sustain them. They ration information, distort perception, and build walls of secrecy to keep the gaze away from the truth. Their strength lies not in force but in concealment. But the human mind, once awakened, cannot return to blindness. Once the trick is seen, it can no longer enchant. This is why revolutions often seem to erupt overnight, why relationships often shift in an instant, why markets collapse suddenly after years of steady illusion. It is not that reality has changed, it is that people have finally seen it. There's danger, too, in living within illusions. They may comfort for a time, but comfort purchased through ignorance is always temporary. The awakening will come whether gentle or brutal. And when it does, the disappointment is harsher because the foundation was never real. People cling to illusions because they fear the emptiness behind them, but the emptiness is less destructive than the collapse that follows when illusions finally break. The cost of ignorance is always greater than the cost of truth. The wise understand this law and wield it carefully. They know that illusions can be used, but they cannot last forever. They can buy time, generate fascination, and create leverage, but they must always be prepared for the moment awareness enters. For once it does, the spell is over, and no force can resurrect it. This is why silence, mystery, and restraint are so often more powerful than constant exposure, because they preserve the illusion longer by keeping ignorance intact. But even the best illusionist knows the end is inevitable. Awareness is the great equalizer, the final weapon that strips away glamour, dismantles strategy, and reveals the plain face beneath the mask. And once revealed, no power can make the illusion whole again. Power is often imagined as the ability to dominate, to bend others to one's will, to control outcomes and dictate terms. But this vision of power is flawed because control always binds the controller as tightly as the controlled. The one obsessed with keeping another under his thumb is himself chained by vigilance, anxiety, and dependence on the very thing he seeks to own. True power does not lie in clinging, in manipulating, or enforcing the game to one's favor. The greatest power is found in detachment, the ability to walk away untouched, unmoved, free from the pull of desire or the weight of expectation. Detachment is liberation, and in that liberation lies a strength that control can never match. When you no longer need to win, you cannot be defeated. When you no longer crave approval, rejection cannot wound you. When you no longer hunger for possession, loss cannot break you. Detachment does not mean indifference, it means mastery over self, an inner stability that refuses to be dictated by the shifting tides of others' behavior or the unpredictability of circumstances. It is standing in the storm yet remaining unshaken, because your sense of value no longer depends on what you can grip, but on what you can release. Walking away untouched is not weakness. It is the boldest declaration of independence, the refusal to be enslaved by the game others are desperate to play. The world thrives on hooks, traps designed to keep you tethered: status, wealth, attention, affection. Each promises fulfillment but delivers dependence. The more you chase, the tighter the chains grow, and the more vulnerable you become to manipulation. Those who know this law exploit it, feeding illusions of scarcity, withholding validation, and controlling access so that you remain ensnared. But the moment you step outside the cycle, when you no longer play by the unspoken rules, their power collapses. They cannot control what is not clinging. They cannot wound what is not attached. Detachment is the invisible shield that breaks every chain, because nothing can be used against you if you have already learned to live without it. Detachment also commands respect in ways control never can. The one who manipulates may inspire fear, but the one who cannot be manipulated inspires awe. In relationships, it is the person who does not beg for attention, who does not crumble at withdrawal, who holds the quiet power. In business, it is the negotiator willing to walk away who secures the best terms. In life itself, it is the individual who can release outcomes, who does not grasp for certainty, who moves with the flow rather than against it, that others admire. This is not the coldness of apathy, but the clarity of perspective. The knowledge that true power lies not in holding tightly, but in letting go gracefully. There is a serenity that comes with detachment, a calm that cannot be purchased through dominance or control. The detached are free to enjoy what comes without fearing its loss, to connect without clinging, to give without calculation. Their strength is rooted in abundance, not scarcity, because they understand that value does not vanish when one thing is lost. It simply shifts, waiting to be discovered elsewhere. This perspective makes them unshakable, while those trapped in the game are forever at the mercy of wins and losses. To live detached is to live untouchable. It is to play when you wish, to walk away when you choose, and to remain whole no matter how the game unfolds. Others may exhaust themselves chasing illusions of power through control, but the one who detaches holds the real throne, because nothing owns him, nothing binds him, nothing moves him except what he allows. Freedom through detachment is not escape from the world, but mastery over it, for the world loses its grip the moment you stop clinging to it.